Welcome everyone to Wrasslin Raw!
You're listening to Wrasslin Raw, the podcast that takes you back to when the World Wrestling Federation developed a little bit of an attitude. Thank you for joining us. You're here with Ryan Arico.
Goldust certainly does not represent the gay community, or any other community for that matter. His alleged sexual preference is not an issue here at Wrasslin Raw.
So fucking cheap. So cheap. I hated it. Joe Giammatteo.
Ladies and gentlemen, unquestionably not only bizarre, but certainly unnerving, Jason Bartlett.
Thank you, Joseph. I will leave it at that. We, here at Wrasslin Raw, are going to examine WWE history one episode of Raw at a time. In this episode of Wrasslin Raw, we're going to be talking about the Raw that aired on January 15th, 1996. This Raw was recorded at the Bob Carpenter Center in Newark, Delaware, and features Vince McMahon and Jerry the King Lawler on commentary. Are you guys ready?
I am ready.
Hold on, I'm just enrolling into the Panty of the Month Club, and all right, I am ready.
All right, then let's get into it. This is something that we will talk about later on in the episode here, but just to kick us off, this is the go-home episode of Monday Night Raw leading into the Royal Rumble, and I mention that now because as we go forward with this, it kind of didn't feel like a go-home episode. That's not a negative critique, really. There are some other negative critiques I have, but it was just kind of odd. I didn't realize that this was the go-home until I looked it up as part of my, weekly prep.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't clear
during
the episode, for sure.
Yeah, Vince mentioned a couple times, the Royal Rumble this Sunday, but it wasn't really shoved down our throats, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, today, here in the United States, we celebrate a man who had a dream. And yes, folks, we are getting some black and white footage of Martin Luther King Jr. And my immediate thought was, I can't wait to see how this is going to be either gimmicked or used to push Shawn Michaels.
Oh, jeez.
I just automatically assumed that Martin Luther King's dream was somehow going to become Shawn Michaels' dream.
They did, however, use that same funeral music while they were showing him, as they did during the I Love You Shawn Michaels video. So
yeah. We move on, though. No additions to that sequence, so hopefully, I was wrong in my initial guesses, and I was. But then we do get a graphic up on the screen warning that the following program contains action of a graphic nature. Viewer discretion is advised. Just real quick, do either of you know, is this originally part of the episode in 96, or did the Cock shove that in there?
I think that must be part of it because we're also getting these Sunny videos, but she isn't quite saying viewer discretion advised yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I took it as it was original, but just the way it looked. It looked like it was, a graphic from 96.
Which is funny because I think, I brought this up just last week or maybe 2 weeks ago that we're about to hit it. I mean, I guess I was just a week off.
Yeah, and that's my next note. And then, holy shit, Ryan, you had just brought this up last week. Our first visual of this episode is Sunny in a nice sun yellow piece of lingerie, laying on a pool table and playing with the balls. Apparently, she's been playing with Gorilla Monsoon's Gorilla Balls to some end. There's some kind of suggestion there that she's been finagling things in the tag team tourney, and I did not realize what was going on until close to the end. They kind of kept this, we'll get to it. We get a view of Goldust, who has, and I quote, outed his feelings, end quote, for Razor Ramon. And then Goldust has his jumpsuit unzipped to show a cartoony, heart-shaped tattoo-like drawing on his chest. Goldust then sensually rubs his tit there for the camera, and then we get a view of Razor Ramon backstage watching this, apparently disgusted. I'm not sure when this happened. It didn't happen on Raw. And I would be shocked to learn that it had happened on the Saturday Morning Superstars.
I I hope it did. I really hope it did.
Those are the only other shows running.
Yeah, what else is there?
Yeah. And did you see what was on the heart? It said Razor.
Mm-hmm.
And he's fondling himself.
Androgynous.
Well, this is all to build up to the fact that there will be a special interview with Goldust in which he, quote, comes on strong, end quote. That's not going to be the last quote about Goldust here in this episode. But Doc Hendrix's sources are telling him that an interview just might not happen, as Razor is supposedly on his way to the arena to confront Goldust. And he's back! More Billionaire Ted! Fantastic. Can't wait for that. Awesome. Still awesome to have the old school music in there to replace that Nitro Light shit. But we come back from the intro to something that sounds like it belongs on the bingo speakers at the VFW. That's the entrance music for our first match of the night. Owen Hart, with Jim Cornette, defeats Marty Jannetty by pinfall in 6 minutes and 10 seconds. As we go into our first sequence in the match, it's Jannetty in control, and it just kind of looks mechanical. Like Marty is just going through the motions with an arm tie-up, and his facial expression looked like he was just bored doing this. I really loved it, however, when Owen took over, and Jim Cornette was there at ringside yelling encouragement up at Owen, and Owen yells back, "I got him now, Jim!" I don't know why I loved it so much. It was just very entertaining. While trying to pay attention to the match, I can't help but hear Vince yelling the name Shawn Michaels. I wasn't sure what the context was with that. I kind of blocked it out, but it's a given that in a match that has nothing to do with Shawn Michaels, he's going to start yelling Shawn Michaels.
You think he was yelling it in his sleep during this time, too?
I imagine. Linda probably flinches every time she hears the name now. She's like permanently traumatized. Things start to pick up now in the match, though, until Jannetty puts on a headlock. There is something lackluster about this match so far in my viewing, and I have a feeling its name is Marty Jannetty. After a drop kick on Marty, Owen jumps up and yells, "I'm the King of Hearts!" which drew a smattering of both boos and applause. Even the selling in the corner looked forced and bored on Jannetty's part. I came to the conclusion here towards the end that Jannetty just murdered this match for me. Owen did his best. Owen even put a pretty creative flourish on the pinfall with a nice-looking bridge for the pin and the 3 count. But it just felt to me, and I think the crowd came to the same conclusion, that there was just no energy happening here. And I really hate to say that with Owen being there, but I'm curious to see if you guys were on the same page as me. Joe, please, what did you think of our show opener?
Yeah, I think that Marty Jannetty should have been given the standard jobber intro on this one and just skip his music and everything altogether. Don't even put his name on the screen. I mean, the match was serviceable, I guess. I did like that bridge finish that Owen did. I thought that was pretty cool, a little different. I mean, I guess the match allowed Owen to shine and show off his abilities a little bit, but I mean, yeah, it's like you said, it's Marty Jannetty. The kids in the crowd were screaming, "We want Bret." And I think they actually wanted Bret instead of Marty Jannetty. I don't think they were trying to heckle Owen. And I agree with all of those children. Speaking of Bret, it's a shame that, Owen Hart has been one of these guys that's sort of, kind of like The Undertaker, just sort of misused for a long time here in the WWF. And it's a shame, ever since his feud with his brother, he hasn't really been in much that has been interesting. So I don't know. This was just okay. Nothing terrible, but just okay.
Yeah, I mean, I know last week we were kind of hoping that this match would be better than just okay, but it didn't end up being like that. And it wasn't because of Owen Hart. He certainly tried. And Bartlett, I completely agree. Just Marty it was mechanical. Just everything looked kind of slow and forced. Maybe, we know that he had a lot of drug issues, but I don't know, maybe he was drugged up and was just not really feeling doing the match or something, you know what I mean? Because that's what it looked like. One of the more exciting things to me was we mentioned a couple times that me and Joe, at least, are Pittsburgh Steelers fans. And the King brings up that just yesterday, the Sunday before this Raw, that Jim Harbaugh missed a pass and allowed the Pittsburgh Steelers to win. And that was an AFC championship game against the Colts that the Steelers went on to the Super Bowl that year and were defeated by the Dallas Cowboys because of the infamous Neil McDonald throwing 2 terrible interceptions that cost the Steelers that game. I mean, Pittsburgh ran that quarterback out of town after that Super Bowl. So it was good to hear that out of the King, just bringing me back to both a good memory and then a few weeks later, a terrible memory. But as far as the match goes, very forgettable stuff out of Marty. Owen at the very end, right before that bridge pin that was beautiful, he pulled off a move that is actually an actual wrestling move. It's called a ball and chain, when you grab someone's arm through their legs and pull it through. That's what that move was, but it then led to that really creative bridge pin that was nice. Yeah, Joe, you said it. Serviceable match, but that's mainly because of Owen. We were giving Marty just a little bit of leeway and credit last week, but he threw it right in our face.
Did he ever? I mean, I think I've made my feelings on this clear, but I almost wondered if it was Marty maybe being a little bit of a diva, acting a little blasé for the match because he was not quite getting his weekly push like he was before.
It could be.
I don't know. That's just my assumption. That's all. But it's equally plausible that it was the drugs.
Some downers.
Things continue their mediocre trend here when Todd Pettingzoo hits our screens. Todd is here to talk about the Royal Rumble. Pettingzoo wants to talk about something that's, and I quote, bigger than TLC's Waterfall One-Eyed Lopez, whatever that is.
Jeez.
Unquote. And I can't believe that nobody just beat the shit out of this guy. I mean, someone in the locker room must have been roided up and reckless enough to look at Pettingzoo's fucking face and want to hit it at least once. I can't believe it never fucking happened. There's going to be a half-hour free-for-all sampler on the preview channel of our cable provider leading into the Royal Rumble this year, and this was actually somewhat interesting to me. My ears perked up a little bit for that. There's going to be a drawing earlier in the day of the Rumble to determine entrant numbers in the Rumble. You know, everybody wants later numbers, and everybody just has a random draw as to when they come in. But when doing that, there's going to be 2 blank slips of paper in whatever, I don't know, bingo roller or what the fuck they're drawing out of. Whoever draws those blank slips will have a match on the free-for-all sampler, and the winner of that match gets the coveted number 30 spot, and the loser gets the number 1 spot. And I gotta tell you guys, I did not hate that concept, and if I were a kid back in 96, whether or not I would have been able to watch the Royal Rumbles up for debate, but I probably would have tuned into that. You know what, let's hear from Diesel, because why not? He's not happy about the attention being on Vader, but fuck him, so let's have another bitching Vader vignette in response.
From the power of the Rocky Mountains, from Boulder, Colorado, I bring you the Prince of Power.
Vader continues to impress here. God damn. Let's go now over to Doc Hendricks, though, who is in some hallway in the arena. And this is another one of those little things that I've been picking up on more and more lately. Backstage scenes, backstage things happening, backstage ways of perpetuating stories. Doc confirms that Razor Ramon is in the arena and that Razor is looking forward to tearing Goldust apart. Before we move along, Joe, what did you think of this free-for-all concept that we were introduced to, as well as the rest of the Royal Rumble report?
Can we still call this the cocaine jam, since it's Todd and not Doc?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Douchebag jam.
The douchebag jam.
You can't really have a jam while Doc's waiting on his source in the parking lot, if you know what I mean.
I know. Poor Doc had to just stand in the back for an hour. The free-for-all is cool. It brought back some memories because I do remember watching these when they were on the preview channel. It's really cool that they sort of made it like a real pre-show because it's giving you some interest in that because you want to see what happens to see, okay, who's going to get number 1, who's going to get number 30. So it's a cool way to get people to tune in, and I like that as well. The Diesel promo, of course, he has to say best of luck, buddy, to Shawn, which was obnoxious. I hate it. Something I don't hate are these Vader vignettes. Holy shit, I love these things. And I'm actually, like, I could actually just watch these for a year. Like, I don't even need to see him in a match, honestly. This man is a wrestler. Like, when you see Vader, this guy was not on episodes of Baywatch and Boy Meets World for no reason. He is just a wrestler.
Yeah, I mean, starting with the free-for-all, I thought that was a really great way to get people involved in the Royal Rumble. And like you said, people that maybe can't afford the Royal Rumble, they could watch the free-for-all. Or if they didn't have a cheater box, one of the two. And the fact that they actually worked this gimmick into it, I thought was a really great way to work it in. Winner and loser get spot 30 and number 1. I mean, great idea. The Diesel promo, pretty decent, and again, just makes us wonder time and time again, where was this Diesel while champ? Those promos that Diesel used to cut for us as champ, they were pathetic, but we've mentioned that before. And we've also mentioned before the love of these Vader vignettes, but I'm going to keep on mentioning it too, because fantastic work out of Vader. I mean, I can't remember in recent memory someone that I've been more excited from these vignettes than Vader, how he's doing. So really, really looking forward to his coming in the WWF.
Yeah, completely agreed. I tend to agree with that too. Now that I really am thinking about it, having heard you say it, I can't think of any other wrestler that I've been this excited about just from vignettes. Maybe Henry Godwinn is kind of a close third or fourth, but that's really the only other one that I can just think of off the top of my head.
And I'm thinking maybe what the hell, Dan Spivey.
Waylon Mercy.
Waylon Mercy. Those were really good. Jeff Jarrett ones were good, but like I said, it's certainly up there.
Yeah. Yeah, and Joe, I completely agree about this man looks like a wrestler. That's a great way of putting it. These are simple training videos. He's just doing workouts in these. He's doing them in his fucking mask. And, he's got the scenery of Colorado and the voiceover, and just for whatever reason, it really comes together perfectly here. And I'm also really glad you guys were up on this free-for-all concept, because I didn't know if it was just going to be me or what, but this is the kind of gimmick that I like. With all due respect to Henry Godwinn and Triple H, the hog pen shit, not really my speed, same with something like the Raw Bowl, but this, where the gimmick is stakes. You're going to win something, you're going to lose something.
That's the big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Good on them for coming up with that idea. All right, well, gentlemen, we're going to escape Todd Petting Zoo and go into our next match. The Ringmaster, with the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, defeats Matt Hardy by submission in 4 minutes and 36 seconds. But before we get to the actual match, let's have some more sex from Sunny. She's sensually chalking up a pool cue with I just wondering if you guys heard it too, a WWF ripoff of Chris Isaak's Wicked Games playing in the background.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And Jesus Christ, she is looking good. There's plenty of cleavage there, but I was kind of confused as to what this has to do with anything, because all she's saying in this is that everyone likes it raw, which is true, but not sure what it has to do with the Ringmaster and Matt Hardy. But, oh well, I'm not complaining in the least bit.
I mean, it was hard not to pay attention, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you can see why they decided to go with that particular strategy.
Yeah.
As we break to commercial, there's a taste of Billionaire Ted, and then a teaser for the upcoming Undertaker Isaac Yankum match later on tonight. Coming back from commercial, oh yeah, that's right, we have a fucking wrestling match going on here. The action here was looking good, and then the Ringmaster lands that classic Steve Austin move of pouncing on his opponent as they come off the ropes, laying in the punches as they go to ground with the Ringmaster on top. That brought me back a good 20 years. When the Ringmaster propped Hardy's legs up in the corner, essentially hanging him there, and then started throwing some working punches, I popped my ass off. This looked great. Things slowed down a bit then, as it looked like they were maybe playing for time, with the Ringmaster choking Hardy on the ropes. And I have to admit that I don't have a whole lot of notes here on this, because I was just fascinated watching the Ringmaster work, as well as Matt Hardy. They both did really well here, but it was especially interesting to see the little glimpses of the future in the Ringmaster's work. There were those little telltale signs that just kept bringing you back to Steve Austin. But of course, we can't have nice things, and the Ringmaster has to throw back to the 80s and end this match with the $1 Million Dream as his finisher, getting the submission and the victory. Ryan, what did you think of that little Sunny vignette, but also, just coincidentally, the in-ring debut of the Ringmaster?
So starting with the Sunny vignette, I agree. I'm not sure where it fits in or why, but I'm not sure I care. It was entertaining to see, and we could probably just leave it at that. But then once the match started, I was super pumped to see that the Ringmaster's debut was going to be against not just a run-of-the-mill jobber, but Matt Hardy. Immediately that was verified, and this match looked like two trained professional wrestlers going at each other. It was fast, it was hard, and like you mentioned, the way they're just these glimpses of Stone Cold that you keep on getting. The launch off the rope into the punches, that little leg and arm motion that he gives before he drops the elbow coming off the ropes. There's just all these little things that take you away that this is the Ringmaster, and you go, oh yeah, we're coming into the age of Stone Cold. There isn't all of these different moves to talk about, just everything looked crisp from both of them. It was just a very exciting thing to watch. Matt Hardy selling really great for Steve here. I was a bit confused about the shorts he had on. They had HV, which isn't Matt Hardy or Hardy Boys. And then I had to think back, and if you guys remember, he did use a gimmick around that time called High Voltage. So I guess he was just using some pants from that gimmick here because they didn't have time to find him anything else. Really, the only disappointing thing of this match was the finisher, the $1 Million Dream bullshit sleeper hold. It was like we kept on seeing all of these just classic Stone Cold moments, and I was just waiting to see the stunner at the end, and instead we got this shitty $1 Million Dream. So Stone Cold has arrived, and it was entertaining as hell to watch, but wish it was a different ending.
Let me tell you something about the Sunny vignette, brother. If you watch this and you don't want to just immediately go take care of business, whether that's just on your own or maybe your spouse is at home and you say, we're going upstairs, there's something wrong with you.
Huh. Oh yeah, Joe? Is that right?
The match, I agree with you guys. It was mostly good. The finisher was a little disappointing. I'll admit, I totally forgot that he used that move.
Yeah, I didn't remember what he used as his finisher as the Ringmaster.
Yeah. I mean, that was disappointing, but I was a little surprised because, most of the match was just him just pummeling and stomping a mud hole, like the Stone Cold Steve Austin style. Makes you sort of scratch your head even more when you realize, okay, Vince is calling him the Ringmaster. You expect more of a technical type of a wrestler. That just goes to show how Vince would just slap any old gimmick on any person, it
didn't matter.
Some of these guys, yeah. Yeah, I liked it. But it just really looks like Stone Cold Steve Austin. So I'm still interested to see how some more matches with him to see how his style had to change later on.
Yeah, agreed on all points. And you're right, Joe. I am looking forward to seeing that. That's going to be kind of cool just to watch the evolution, how we get from this to the Black Trunks. All right. Well, guys, let's all just bend over and loosen our anuses for Shawn Michaels now. We're going to get a recap of the entire Shawn Michaels saga, starting with 9 thugs in Syracuse. Shawn has goals and dreams, in case you didn't know, and this just goes on for much longer than it should. But I know I really haven't said a lot here. It's because it's a Shawn Michaels video package. There is literally nothing here that we haven't seen repeated ad nauseum. So I don't think our listeners really need to get it repeated to them all over again. But both of you guys did watch it. And so I wanted to ask both of you just briefly, and I'll start with Ryan here, because Ryan, you're on record as saying that you don't need this constant fluffing to like Shawn Michaels, and that in fact the fluffing kind of aggravates you. Is that a pretty good, summary of your feelings on this?
That's fairly accurate, and it continues with this, when we get to hear him doing his own voiceover. Giving his trials and tribulations, whining about everything.
Well, that was going to be my question to you. Now that you have seen this one, it's a little bit different than the rest of them. Do you like him more now, Ryan?
No. The answer is no.
Okay, well, it just, God, it feels so desperate.
It's an entire recap of one of the worst and cheesiest pushes in the history of wrestling.
Yeah, it keeps on striking me as borderline desperate and almost pathetic and like attention seeking. And I love how it keeps on coming back to the whole Vince McMahon tie-in, Vince seeing himself in this, but it's just to the point of like, please love me, please.
Yeah, it's just Vince thinking that it's obviously he doesn't have that much confidence that Shawn can carry the company.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, let's go to Doc for an update. Doc's got something going on here. He says now, even though he was in the building before, Doc's sources say that Razor's only a few miles away now. So it sounds like Doc met his sources there in the parking lot. He's getting a little confused, but he just might make it in time to get there for the Goldust interview, which is what's coming up next, according to Vince there. Also coming up next, another installment of Billionaire Ted's Wrasslin War Room. And we cut to commercial, but wait a second, none of that is coming up next because we return to our next match already in progress. The Smoking Guns defeat the Spiders, consisting of Spider 1 and Spider 2, by pinfall. And this is a detail that is somewhat contested. I didn't hear it mentioned on the match, but again, we came to this match in progress. Online, it was listed as having the WWF Tag Team Championship up for grabs, with the Smoking Guns retaining the championship with their victory here. But I did not hear that mentioned on TV, so if somebody wants to correct me on that, please do. But in the meantime, the Spiders are our Jobbers of the Week. Take it, Ryan.
Thank you, Bartlett. The Spiders are this week's Jobbers. I'm doing them together because these two spent pretty much their entire careers wrestling together as tag team. The Spiders are made up of Charles Warrington and Glenn Ruth. Glenn was born on June 13th, 1969 in Camden, New Jersey, and Charles on May 28th, 1971 in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Ruth trained under Larry Sharp and debuted in 1990 as The Spider in the WWA, while also assisting Sharp in training other wrestlers. One of those wrestlers was Charles Warrington. Charles debuted in 1993 in the WWF, making a few appearances as a jobber under the name Chaz War. In 1994, Charles and his former trainer Glenn Ruth formed a tag team called the Spiders. Other than the Spiders, they have also used the names the Flying Nuns, the Guardians of Truth, the Sisters of Love, and the Headbangers. They made their debut together in National Wrestling Alliance, and they also wrestled for ECW and Jim Cornette's Smoky Mountain Wrestling between 94 and 96. Then, in 1996, they made their WWF debut. briefly wrestling as the Spiders and also the Arachnoids before returning to the independent circuit for a little while, but then returning to the WWF in November of 96 as the non-jobber tag team, the Headbangers. As the Headbangers, they would see success, even holding the WWF tag team belts for just over a month, but their popularity was fairly weak, and the WWF magazine in 2007 even listed them in an article about people who were not worthy of the belts they held, calling them just placeholders between the Smoking Guns and the New Age Outlaws. Their time at the WWF would end in 2000, only returning basically as jobbers in 2016 to lose in the first round of a tag team tournament. Since 2000, though, they continued to wrestle with each other to this day, still as the Headbangers, appearing on Ring of Honor, as well as a giant list of indie promotions. Their most recent match together was on April 20th, 2021, losing to the CCW Tag Team Champs, the South American Alliance.
We can't forget one of them was Beaver Cleavage, I think, right?
He did. That was during the time that Thrasher got injured briefly.
Yeah.
So he went on a bit of a solo run as Beaver.
Beaver Cleavage, and he was just playing Chaz too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like this confusion too with their name. When I read the Observer, Meltzer is always like going back and forth between spiders and arachnoids, and I saw their tights had arachnoids, but Vince is calling them the Spiders.
It sounds like they did a couple shows as both for the WWF.
All right. Well, thank you, Ryan. Enlightening as always. Again, just as a reminder, it was up in the air as to whether or not this was a tag team championship match, and I wrote my notes with the belief that it was. So, again, if I'm wrong, please correct me. First off, I would like to give you a match time on this, but I can't since we joined the match in progress, and it wasn't just a immediately after the bell match in progress. This match was already going. Second off, why the fuck are the Spiders getting a shot at the tag team belts? Why the fuck is this happening at all? And then there's pretty much the pinfall and the victory for the Smoking Guns. This match can't have lasted any more than a minute and a half max. And given the circumstances with, it starting in progress, and I'm honestly not sure how much we can really talk about it, but Joe, what did you think of this match? And since this was maybe a title defense, I guess, what do you think this means for the tag team division as a whole?
Well, really disappointed. I mean, we just randomly get into this match after a commercial break, didn't even know it was happening. It just goes to show, like, it's par for the course here with how tag team wrestling has been treated over the past couple years, really. I totally understand why a lot of times you hear people say that Vince doesn't really like tag team wrestling. I mean, it makes sense. If you watch, these years, 94 to 96, it's like, yeah, I mean, he really doesn't give a shit about it. I mean, these are your tag team champs that you're just randomly throwing on like half of their match. Like, it just doesn't make sense. And then we saw them, was it the last pay-per-view? They were handing out presents. Like, they didn't even have a match. So it's pretty disappointing. Hopefully 96 will get us into some better tag team matches.
Yeah, this was just really sad. We have no clue this match is even taking place. We just come back from break and it's literally towards the end of the match. It's clear that the Spiders are jobbers right now because they are dressed exactly like the Executioners, except they have arachnids down the leg instead of Executioners. I mean, there's nothing to say about this match because almost immediately we come back, we get the finisher, and it's over. You couldn't even say this is your standard jobber match because we missed almost all of it. Just terrible treatment of the tag team champions here, just giving them zero screen time.
Yeah, completely agreed. We do get a little bit of information later that gives me a little bit of hope, but yeah, just really, really shitty that the tag team division is in this state. I mean, they don't have a whole lot of competition. It's kind of unfortunate that the tag team division as it exists right now is the Smoking Guns and then mostly a bunch of paired up singles. But that will be changing in the future here, I hope, for the better. But yeah, Just horrible. It almost makes me wonder if this was a spur-of-the-moment thing thrown together just to fill some time. It almost has that kind of feeling to it. But let's move it along now to Billionaire Ted's Wrasslin War Room again. They call their former talent disloyal, greedy has-beens from the 80s. Fucking just, that's rough, man. I don't know if it's just me, but the Billionaire Ted character seems to get more and more incoherent as time goes on. I'm not sure if that was just like how they planned it or what, but let's just move past this to the interview with Goldust. Vince McMahon is in the ring with the microphone, and I love how pissed off and disgusted Vince got when Goldust played with Vince's tie and stroked Vince's hair. Vince gets right to it and point blank asks whether Goldust really means what he says, or if Goldust is trying to prey on the homophobic fears of someone that oozes machismo. Goldust replies by asking Vince if that's an extra microphone in his pants or if Vince is just happy to see him. And I popped my ass off. Goldust just keeps amping up the creep factor, and it is fantastic. I fucking loved this interview. It truly was bizarre. It truly was like nothing else we have seen so far. The one thing that I did not like quite as much was when the King called Goldust a queer. Let's get past that, though, to check in with Doc Hendricks. His sources are telling him that Razor Ramon has just pulled into the parking lot, or maybe now his source has pulled into the parking lot with the 8-ball. I'm not sure. This whole Doc Hendricks thing, the timing just hasn't been working out. Next up, a video package about The Undertaker, getting us hyped for the upcoming championship match. This was almost like a movie trailer. It was pretty cool and unique. Now, finally, Doc Hendricks is here, and so is Razor Ramon, but Razor's pissed off and is looking for Goldust, so he doesn't stop to talk with Doc other than to just demand where Goldust is. So we'll take a break here. There's a lot to unpack in this segment, and I do realize that I used a pretty offensive word in my breakdown there, and I just want our listeners to know that I was quoting somebody in that, and I personally found it pretty distasteful, as I'm sure we all did, but Joe, please, what did you think of the Wrasslin War Room, that Goldust interview, and the Undertaker video package?
Well, I'll start with Billionaire Ted. I'll go in order here. Once again, we have to see another Billionaire Ted skit that's just not very funny. You know, it's almost like just watching a bad episode of Saturday Night Live. They just keep running skit after skit that's not funny. I just don't understand the obsession with doing this every week. And not only that, but Vince is like teasing it all episode long. Like he loves this shit.
Yeah. Like the fans are clamoring for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's like the highlight of the show for him. So pretty weird. Speaking of weird, the Goldust interview, really bizarre and unnerving, as Vince said. It's really weird to me. I liked it. I didn't pop my ass off during any of it, but I liked it. It's just kind of out of nowhere a little bit. A couple things in this episode were sort of like that. But yeah, this is just like really, like they're going all in on this. And this is right before Marlena comes into the picture. I think she comes in at the Royal Rumble, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
I wonder if they had this planned, like if they knew she was going to come in like a couple months ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or if this was just running like interference for all the backlash they're getting.
It's really interesting. And yeah, I agree with what the King said. Like, I don't think that belongs on TV. It's just asking people to start chanting that or other words, that type of stuff. So it is pretty edgy, but it's like, okay, now they're going to bring in Marlena. So now, if I remember right, like it's almost like people thought, oh, maybe Goldust is bisexual now. That kind of stuff.
It's just a really, really poor way to try and draw heat on someone.
Yeah.
It's uncalled for. Even back in the 90s, I don't think that was appropriate.
Yeah, I don't have much to say on the Undertaker stuff. So Ryan, you can go ahead.
Starting with the War Room thing, I mean, this is just, it's still sad and still terrible. I don't have much else to talk about it. But the Goldust interview with Vince, I'm kind of with you, Bartlett. I really thought this was great. Just, I was laughing my ass off every time you could see Vince getting pissed about another thing that Goldust did, fixing his tie or caressing his hair, or the way he strutted or accentuated the way he ended the T with Goldust as he was rubbing his nipples. I mean, just everything he was doing here was hilarious, and I thought it was great. The Undertaker commercial thing, I agree with you, Bartlett, that it felt very movie-like. They had the, like, midnight Halloween movie guy doing the voiceover, and it felt like a horror movie or something, like a trailer for a horror movie. So I thought they did a good job with that commercial. Different. It was different than what we're used to.
Did it remind you of Tootsie? And back on the you said Goldust rubbing his nipples. And you remember last week, I think I reported from the Observer that fans were getting disturbed by Goldust fondling himself. And he's definitely doing that a lot more than when he first came in, for sure.
Yeah, this was the whole thing. Just the king, if we could just remove the king from the situation, the one person who is usually most of the, we'll say, questionable commentary here. But yeah, I loved it. Just so fucking weird. Well, we will go now into our final match of the night. The Undertaker with Paul Bearer defeats Isaac Yankum DDS by pinfall in 8 minutes and 30 seconds. The stare down to start the match was great, eye to eye. The only thing missing was a working gimmick for Glenn Jacobs. What was also great is that the ringside camera was close enough to Paul Bearer for the mic to pick up Paul Bearer murmuring, "Oh yes," at ringside, just over and over again. And I have to say that I was enjoying watching the match. Up to this point in my notes, there really wasn't anything spectacular going on, but The Undertaker and Yankum were working really well together. And then Jerry Lawler says that it's all because of the power of the urn. And then Jerry gets up from commentary. I was dreading what was going to come next, not only because the focus was put on the King's interference, but also the power of the urn. Two things that have not played out well in storyline over the past couple years. I have to also note that when we started this podcast, I never thought that I would come to realize that Jerry Lawler's presence had the potential to ruin so many things. Paul Bearer struggling to hold on to the urn come chain was funny, as was Paul's facial expressions as he smooches the chains after Undertaker chases Lawler away. I really wish they would just melt down that chain and turn it into an urn again so that we can stop having this power of the urn when nobody's holding an urn kind of thing going on. But now let's go to Doc Hendricks, who assures us that Goldust has just promised him that at the conclusion of this match, he will discuss his matchup next week on Raw with Bret Hart. Vince makes a loud, clear point on commentary that Goldust does not represent the gay community and that his sexuality is not an issue in the WWF. We think he doth protest too much.
I'm guessing he threw that in after King's comment.
Yeah, hopefully. After he got back down out of the ring and sat down, somebody in his earpiece said, Jerry said...
What? God damn it! Damn it, Jerry.
It was really great when Isaac Yankum was setting The Undertaker up for a tombstone, only for The Undertaker to reverse it into what I assume was a tombstone of his own. I say assume because right at the pivotal moment, we cut to a scene of Doc Hendricks backstage pacing. And that's it. We got it just long enough to miss the move in the ring, and Doc Hendricks doesn't even look at the camera. The Undertaker then does get a tombstone onto Yankum for the cameras, and with a drawn-out, slow-ass fucking 3 count from Earl Hebner, The Undertaker gets the pinfall and the victory. Before we move along, Ryan, as our resident asshole for The Undertaker, what did you think of our final match of the night here?
Yeah, I thought this was a fairly solid match to finish the night out. just kind of throwing this match together between the two, but I thought they worked great together. Starting, like you said, with the stare down, and how many people do we see that could go eye to eye with the Undertaker? There's not many at all. And then the match starts, and the moment they show Paul Bear's face is he's basically making out with the chain. It just fucking glorious, absolutely glorious. Everything about the man. They give us kind of I think what we would come to think of as a big guy, a standard big guy match. And by that, I mean, Undertaker versus Kane, because you can kind of see why they had this long running feud in the future, because they were good together for two big guys. Yes, it's a little bit slower and more lumbering than Jeff Jarrett and Shawn Michaels match or something. But I think that when you think about two big guys going up against each other, this is the type of match you think of. I didn't like Lawler interrupting, but I'm glad it didn't really do much for the match. All it really did was allow Isaac Yankum to take over for a little bit. It gave him that edge, and we got to see some good work out of Glenn Jacobs. In the end, though, I thought it was great to also see the tombstone, again, giving us those flashes into the future with Kane when he tries to land a tombstone on the Undertaker. It does make me wonder what took so long. Like, why do we end up having to wait another year and a half before we decide that Kane or Glenn Jacobs will be a good person to feud with the Undertaker? We had all these Mabel, Giant Gonzalez, Yokozuna times. Here, this is what you are looking for when you have someone that maybe can actually threaten the Undertaker, not these pieces of shit that can't wrestle.
Yeah, a dentist.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the match was good. I think that it kind of makes sense, too, because you have two baby faces that are going to have a championship match at the Royal Rumble that we haven't really built up to, Undertaker and Bret Hart. And I got to thinking, and I was like, well, I guess this kind of makes sense because both of these guys had a little, short little program with Yankum now. They both wrestled against Isaac Yankum. I feel like the Bret Hart and Isaac Yankum match, like, was there unfinished business still there? I don't even remember. That's how shitty it was.
With the whole Bret Hart, Yankum, Lawler triangle.
Getting choked on the ropes and stuff. Yeah.
It's kind of safe to assume that there's always going to be unfinished business because I'm sure they'll dredge it up eventually.
But then I believe after that, didn't we have a tag team with Lawler and Yankum versus Bret? And I can't remember who was on his side.
Hakushi.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. So I don't know. I think they've done a pretty bad job at leading up to that particular match. But, what can you do with two guys that are probably, arguably the most popular guys in the company, both baby faces? So I'll give them a pass on that one. But, some disappointing things about this match was the commentary. You guys mentioned a little bit about Lawler, but just the commentary was more obsessed with Goldust than they were with this match. Mm-hmm. So that bothered me a little bit. The pep talk by Jerry Lawler at the beginning with Isaac Yankum was kind of annoying. And Bartlett, you bring up a great point. It is kind of surprising to see how annoying Jerry Lawler was during this time, because you got someone like Paul Bearer out there, and it's like, man, this is great to see how great he was back then. Mm-hmm. But with Lawler, it's like, my God, he's annoying sometimes. This was one of them. And I thought the same thing. Like, why is the urn still a chain? Why don't they have an urn yet? Because I thought that whole thing was kind of over as well, but maybe it's not. So we'll see what happens. But I thought the match was okay. I thought it was good. The tombstone looked a little wonky. I think maybe Glenn Jacobs had his legs too far apart, maybe, because Undertaker really put him down pretty soft. But yeah, it was a good match.
I really can't add a whole lot here other than to say I kind of thought that this was maybe a little bit of a missed opportunity. I agree that these two worked really well together, but as you said, Joe, this is the go-home show for the Royal Rumble. This is the last match going into the Royal Rumble, and it feels like, and I know this is, hindsight kind of booking, I guess, but wouldn't this have been the perfect spot for Diesel to challenge The Undertaker? Diesel's been running his mouth for a couple weeks now about how The Undertaker doesn't deserve the spot and Diesel deserves it and blah, blah, blah. If Kevin Nash were a true professional and if we were really trying to get The Undertaker over going into the Royal Rumble, I feel that I mean, it might not have been a great match, technically speaking, but as far as storyline goes, I think it would have given The Undertaker a pretty good rub going into the Rumble. But that's just me. Backstage now with Doc Hendricks and Goldust finally, after all of these fucking teases, all episode long, we finally have Goldust backstage. And of course, Goldust is fondling himself there with Doc until Razor attacks. And this was some great looking backstage fight action that we have not really seen so far in the WWF, as Razor beats the ever-loving shit out of Goldust, hitting him with trash cans, throwing him through a barrier, tossing him into walls and onto a table. But then the tides turn when Goldust gives Razor a good old-fashioned uppercut to the balls. This ends pretty damn quickly as Razor goes down. We break for commercial and come back to find Sunny naked in a fucking bathtub. Of course, there's no nudity here, but she is tastefully and strategically covering herself. But it was shocking to see nonetheless on here. Again, not complaining, but shocking, very surprising, because this shit went from 0 to 60 pretty fast in this episode. She asks if we realize that we just did it for almost an hour. Apparently in reference to the length of the episode, finishing it up with, "Now that's Raw." We'll end our episode with a replay of the Goldust Razor incident and then some aftermath. Next week on Monday Night Raw, Bret the Hitman Hart will take on Goldust. Don't forget, everybody, this Sunday is the Royal Rumble, featuring matches like the Hitman versus the Undertaker for the WWF Championship, Goldust versus Razor Ramon for the Intercontinental Championship, the Smoking Guns versus the newly minted tag team of the Body Donnas for the Tag Team Championship, Ahmed Johnson versus Double J, Jeff Jarrett, and of course the Royal Rumble itself. Just to kind of cap things off, we once again go backstage to Doc Hendricks, where Razor is still somewhat angry as Goldust tries to flee with a trench coat and a suitcase. I thought that was fucking awesome. I love that. I popped my ass off yet again. Razor once again attacks Goldust, throwing him into an electrical circuit breaker panel, and then through an exterior door and out into the parking lot, just beating Goldust in a snowbank, with Goldust eventually tripping Razor into the side of a truck so that Goldust can make his getaway in a car there as we fade to black. Ryan, please get us going on the way that our go-home episode of Raw ended tonight.
So, starting with the Goldust talking with Doc Hendricks and then Razor attacking him, stuff we haven't seen backstage, the way Razor just fucking beat the living shit out of Goldust. This was loud. I mean, some of these hits looked extremely painful. And then very fittingly, Goldust finishes it off with the low blow. Great stuff there. And then we see a guy get hit in his balls, and then we go to Sunny telling us we just did it for an hour. All right. I mean, I'll take it. But then when we go backstage, Razor continues to beat on Goldust. That hit off that electrical panel, my God, was it loud. Then right to the outside into the snowbank, and it reminded me of an incident that might have included some drinks from years ago back in college when I powerbombed Joe into a snowdrift many, many years ago. It reminded me of that, but I thought a very entertaining way to end Raw. And setting up the Goldust Razor match, I don't know if you could do a better job.
Yeah.
Yeah, I popped my ass off for this backstage brawl because of a couple things. Number one, like you guys said, we haven't really seen this ever or very much at all. These two guys are just perfect for that. I mean, as far as Scott Hall goes, I mean, we saw him once beat the shit out of Dean Douglas. And now we're getting him and Goldust. And man, Dustin Runnels can really sell this shit really well. And yeah, this was awesome. Sunny in the tub was just, I'm just thinking, where are they going with this? I don't understand. Like you said, it's kind of out of nowhere. And it got me to thinking, last week, the Observer News said that they were trying to do some kind of a Anna Nicole Smith type gimmick with her. So maybe they're getting into that at some point. I don't know. It's just weird. But yeah, the brawling outside, the car, him getting in the car. When I saw him with the trench coat in the bag, I just laughed my ass off. And then him getting in the car and driving away, it was just, it was funny as hell. Like when they were outside, I just couldn't stop laughing.
The trench coat and the briefcase is just so great, like fitting into his gimmick of this Hollywood guy. So he's using like this stereotypical disguise to try and get away. Just absolutely perfect.
While wearing this onesie, you know, it's got his package on display. Get into the old soft top Cadillac and driving away.
Yeah, completely agreed. This whole thing was just awesome. And it's funny because, as you've said, I mean, this is really getting us going for that match, the Intercontinental match between Goldust and Razor. But with the build-up that they've been doing here, with Goldust just fucking with Razor and Razor getting progressively more and more angry about it, I gotta be honest, and this is kind of the trend with this episode, I completely forgot about it leading into an actual match, let alone a title match. Mm-hmm. This, to me, just kept on reminding me of just the discomfort between the two and the antagonism between the two. And this is a good story, regardless of what you want to say about, Scott Hall's discomfort in real life with some of this and just kind of the over-the-top bizarreness of what Goldust is doing here. This is probably one of the best stories I've seen here on Raw in a very long time. And with that, that's it. Our episode is over. We faded to black. So let's take it on over now to highlights and lowlights. Joe, why don't you go first?
So was it me, or when you guys were watching this, did this seem like a really long episode of Raw? It was only 45 minutes like all the others during this time period, but it just seemed really long to me. The other thing is, this episode is crazy because we get the mature content disclaimer at first, but this is just out of nowhere. Like, there's a lot of shit in here that we were not seeing before. Like, Sunny was a manager for Skip, wearing like workout gear, and now all of a sudden we see her showing cleavage and being naked in a tub, like just out of nowhere, saying she likes it raw. And then we have Goldust with all of his crazy antics. Like if you're a kid watching Raw every week and then you see this, as a parent, I'd be like, whoa, holy shit. My 10-year-old is watching this and then there's this crazy shit happening just out of nowhere. With all that said, my highlight was definitely this backstage brawl. I absolutely loved it. I was kind of annoyed with the build-up, going to Doc Hendricks like 50 different times during this episode, but when it finally happened, it was great. For my low light, I have to say just the constant Billionaire Ted skits. Like, maybe one every few weeks would be okay, but not every single week.
My highlight, and it was tough, I was really trying to think hard between the backstage stuff and what I ultimately went with, which was the Ringmaster versus Matt Hardy match. I really thought this was a great match between two future Hall of Famers, and it really did a good job of debuting the Ringmaster and just bringing back all of these memories of Stone Cold, seeing him in all of these spots that we're used to seeing him in. So to me, it brought me into a place that I'm just so happy to see us finally get to. My low light, I'm going to go with the treatment of the Smoking Guns, and I guess in connection with that, their match with the Spiders, because this match didn't even really take place. We came back in time to watch the Smoking Guns land their finisher. Just the way that we have completely disrespected and ignored the Smoking Guns, who are a very good tag team, just really made this the low light for me.
I had a pretty hard time with this episode. There were a lot of potential candidates on both sides, both highlights and lowlights. For lowlights, I kind of wanted to go with the Smoking Guns. I kind of wanted to go with Billionaire Ted, but I ended up going with the Shawn Michaels vignette yet fucking again, because If we had not done that almost every fucking week for the past 3 months, if this had been the first and only one of these Shawn Michaels video packages leading into Royal Rumble, I could very well see myself being more emotionally invested in how Shawn Michaels performs at the Royal Rumble. But because we've got it every fucking week, this did nothing to get me ready for Shawn at the Rumble, and it just pissed me off. It made me dislike him that little bit more, and I don't want to do that.
I want to see Owen hit him with another enziguri and put him back in the hospital at this point.
Yeah, knock his eye crossed. My highlight, and again, there were a couple potential highlights here. That Ringmaster match was great, but, and I really wanted to do Sonny as a highlight, but I couldn't bring myself to it, because the true highlight for me in this entire match was everything that Goldust was in, both the interview and the backstage brawl. I'm psyched. I'm psyched for the Goldust match with Razor Ramon now, and this is the first time in a long time that a go-home show has gotten me looking forward to a match this much. So I'm very happy to say that. It doesn't happen often, or at least it hasn't happened often enough. So we've got that out of the way. Joseph, do you have any contemporary wrestling news from on and around January 15th, 1996 for us?
Yes, I do. All information from the Wrestling Observer from January 18th, 1996. Apparently, the first lawsuit shot has been fired by WCW in the Monday Night Wars. There are reports that Eric Bischoff was not fond of the steroid comments from the Billionaire Ted skit last week. But I gotta say, when I was reading further into this, it doesn't sound like there was actually a lawsuit, more of a threat of a lawsuit. So I will keep you updated on that as we go. Speaking of the Billionaire Ted skit, Dave Meltzer appears to be quite offended by the skit referring to Macho Man as disloyal. So I don't know if you guys noticed, but during the skit, they said that Scheme Gene was a con man, the Huckster was a has-been from the 80s, and Macho Man was disloyal. Well, Dave Meltzer says, this is a business, and because a man gets a better business offer, someone in a business that lacks almost all ethics to begin with labels that person as disloyal. Dave goes on to say, wouldn't you think it would be disloyal to turn on the man who more than anyone else made someone and his company the financial success they were at their peak, and was a key beneficial witness to his acquittal in his steroid trial? So, pretty good points there.
Yeah.
Brought up.
Yes.
Supposedly, Psycho Sid is out of action with a disc problem in his neck. Bartlett, you mentioned that we were told the Body Donnas are getting a title shot, right? For the tag team titles?
Yes, sir.
That was supposed to be Sid and the 1-2-3 Kid. They changed that because Sid is currently dealing with a neck issue, so we'll have to keep an eye on that as well.
I wonder, it must actually be a neck issue because it's a little early in the year for baseball.
Yeah, softball season is probably, this is January. So,
yeah, still too early for that.
Yeah, unless they play year-round down in Florida, who knows?
That's true.
Being Florida, man, it's...
Yeah, it is Florida. I forget about that.
Dave Meltzer has some comments about this particular episode of Raw that I would like to read to you guys. He said that there was a great video feature on Shawn Michaels, so he loved that. He also said there was a great hallway brawl with Razor Ramon and Goldust. He also says about that brawl, despite everyone saying Jim Cornette has nothing to do with booking yet, his DNA was all over this angle with them brawling out of the building and the heel getting in his car and leaving.
Whatever, I loved it.
Yeah. Dave Meltzer says that other parts of the show really reeked of desperation. He said that Vince had to read what sounded like a lawyer's statement that Goldust does not represent the gay community.
Yeah.
He said they did a spot where Sonny was wearing a very low-cut top and bent over as much as possible while shooting pole. What was last week's slogan? Oh yeah, nothing artificial here. Straight from the Observer. A second part was her in a bubble bath implying she'd had just had sex for the past hour. Hey, it works on silk stockings.
Silk stockings.
Another huge burn by Dave, right?
Yeah.
So I guess, yeah, he's not a fan of all this extra stuff that was in there. Last story here is that the WWF did a house show in Montreal, and there was a team there, a very original name, guys. They were called the Canadians as a tag team. One of the members of that team could not perform that night due to an injury, I guess, but that did not stop him from trying to hit on Sunny. After being turned down a second time, this guy got really vulgar and crude with her, but Kevin Nash overheard what the guy was saying and said that if he didn't want to be on the disabled list a lot longer, he better leave her alone. So apparently the guy just walked away. So pretty noble move there by Kevin Nash. I wonder if he would still do the same thing today for her. And that is all.
All right. Thank you, Joseph. Illuminating as always. And that's it, folks. We are done with this one. I want to thank you again for joining us. If you like what we're doing here and want to connect with us, you can email us at WRASSLINRAW and just add @gmail.com to the end of that to submit questions or comments. Check us out on social media and on every podcast subscription platform. While you're there, don't forget to click follow and subscribe to get every episode of Wrasslin Raw coming to you every week. Give us a 5-star review and let your friends know how much cooler they would be if they became Rawheads like you and me. Next week on Wrasslin Raw, we're going to take a look at the 1996 Royal Rumble with matches featuring The Undertaker, Ahmed Johnson, and many more. So, for Joe and Ryan, I'm Jason, and this has been Wrasslin Raw.